Welcome to Data War.
Welcome everybody for another episode of Data Wars podcast. Me, Prash Chandramohan, and my co-host Hash Srivastava are here today to talk to Rudy Ionides. Rudy is someone who is mastered the art of data management. It feels like just looking at his LinkedIn profile and the data information I know about, but I can't wait to sort of unwind the insights that Rudy was going to share today. Ash, I'm super excited. Are you?
Me too. I'm super pumped. I've known Rudy for some time and I'm very excited. Well, first of all, welcome, Rudy, on our podcast.
Thanks, Ash. Thanks, Prash. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Rudy's a busy man, so we're really happy that he was able to take out some time for us. I'll get right into it. I want to learn more about, Rudy, about your journey and how you sort of got here. You started, as a software engineer, and now, you're senior leader at Walmart. So tell our audience a bit about your journey and how you started, how it evolved into data strategy and leadership roles.
Okay. I'll try to be brief, split it up into like two sections.
Okay.
The first half of my career was, as you said, developer, working for various startups in different industries. I was in engineering, in healthcare, in supply chain. And then moved into a consulting role where I was actually working across multiple industries. The one common thread during that time where I was a developer and moving up the ranks of development was I worked exclusively for business process management solutions. Those are workflows that drive efficiency or introduce controls or do both. And so that was the common thread. The consulting role that I ended up having allowed me the opportunity to work for insurance firms and for financial institutions, primarily working in the US. So I was a road warrior for about 3 years, 4 days working down in the States and then coming back immediately afterwards to Toronto. I think during that time, I had one role where I was actually local, which was a nice break. And it was at a Canadian bank at RBC. But during that time, the company that I worked for, the that was one of too many companies and I mixed them all up. It was Pegasystems. They were the BPM mid-sized firm. They are utilized everywhere. They are the firm to utilize. That they afforded me that opportunity to work for numerous institutions. And one of the things that changed for me and caused a transition was I was about to get married. I was thinking about having kids, and I saw a lot of the guys who were on the road who did have families who were away from their kids and weren't really active and with families, at least in my view, because my father was the same way. He was a road warrior, and I knew that I wanted to be at home. So I started to look for opportunities back in Toronto. And interestingly enough, having worked for small and mid-sized firms, it was very difficult to break into the financial institutions. But working for a consulting firm really afforded me an opportunity where I did start working with them. And as a result, once I started looking locally, they were willing to meet with me because they saw that I had that banking experience. It was like I knew the secret fraternity or sorority handshake to get in, and it made life much easier. So one little piece of advice for those that might be struggling and transitioning across industries is if you jump into a consulting role, you will get that exposure and experience. Not only does that open the doors, but also lets you learn what areas interest you more than others. And I found my experience in finance actually was, there was a lot of interest there. I understood the business. I liked what they were doing. It was, straight math, in my opinion, which, as technology guys, it's part of our core curriculum. So it made it so that I had the opportunity to look for finding roles. So when I settled back in Toronto, I landed my first role really at RBC. And that's when I started to transition from being an individual contributor into managerial roles. So I took on a dev manager responsibility, and then I found that slowly parlaying into more and more senior level roles, not just within RBC, but within other organizations as well. My time at RBC was initially in capital markets, in finance, and I transitioned there from being just a dev manager to associate director. I left for about a year because I got an enticing offer to go back and do some contract work for Pega at another bank at TD, if memory serves. So I went into that for a year. And then the SVP at RBC wrote me back into RBC at a more senior level. So I went from associate director to director.
Nice.
Spent a lot of time working in that role in risk technology. specifically enterprise and wholesale credit risk, where I was managing a whole suite of applications that the organization was using to manage risk. During that time, this is when I started to, I hate saying this, I moved into data, because all roles in the technology world involve data, unless you are building a stateless solution. And I can tell you, in my 25-year career, I have built one stateless solution, and I have built countless stateful or data-related assets. So really, we're always in data. But I moved into the, I guess, big data space. Let's use that to differentiate. I moved into the big data space during my tenure at RBC, when I moved again from being a director to a senior director. And I took on the responsibility of consolidating all of our risk data across all of the risk domains, not just wholesale enterprise risk, but market risk as an alternative example, into a single platform. Back then, we were on a on-prem data lake. It was either Hadoop, I believe, or Cloudera, and we were loading everything there for consumption by a number of use cases. The one critical customer client, whatever you'll have, was for a regulatory program, IFRS 9. And IFRS 9, if I distill it down into simplistic terms, really just the way that I understood it, was really just credit risk monitoring for mortgages. And what was unique about this use case is obviously regulatory in nature, but in order for their models to run successfully, they needed 2 life cycles worth of data. And from a mortgage standpoint, that can be up to 50 years of data. And a lot of the systems that were around now weren't in place back then. So we were actually going back to Iron Mountain and pulling up paper and transcribing that paper back into data format to feed into the model. So there were a whole host of challenges with that. But one of the core critical aspects to running this program, because it was regulatory in nature, was a very, very strong governance practice that needed to be established. And we'll come back to that in a bit, because you guys are going to ask me about that later. But that was a big component to delivery of that program and a lot of the other initiatives that we were doing. One of the things that I was trying to drive at the time was, this was all in nascent stages. This was roughly like 10, 15 years ago. Big data was just starting to take shape in the organization. And there were pockets of people doing this in finance and in fraud and in HR and even in like Canadian retail banking. And looking around at my peers, both on the technology side and the business side, I started to think, we all did, we're all reinventing the wheel here. Why don't we look at establishing some sort of enterprise strategy that doesn't constantly bring in the same data sets, builds the same frameworks for ingestion and curation, consumption? Why don't we do something at the enterprise level that everybody could just benefit from? Because even the data sets themselves were overlapping across the organization. So we put together, working closely together, not only on the technology side of the business, a proposal for the C-suite. And what I thought in my mind was going to be a slam dunk, because I had gone to many investment board reviews with these guys where they were saying, you know what, somebody just came through the doors here and asked for $1 million to pipe this data feed in. You're now asking me for the same money for the same feed. Why am I doing this over and over again? So come in and say, hey, look, we're going to run an enterprise. We're going to bring it into one location for everybody to consume from. Slam dunk. But it kept getting pushed back on us. They kept coming back and saying, we want it bigger, bolder, better. And we went through this about 3 quarters, and I started to scratch my head and wonder, like, is the organization ready to establish something at the enterprise level? Right? Like, give us like a grassroots movement opportunity to show you the value and let it grow that way, similar to how we've been organizing ourselves. So I lifted my head up and started saying, someone somewhere has to have bought into this in some FI, financial institution. Went into LinkedIn. First role I saw was TD had just established an enterprise data analytics team, and they were looking at somebody to drive strategy. Exactly what I've been doing at RBC, but at the enterprise level rather than at the risk level. So applied, got lucky, landed the role, and then worked there for about 3 years. That opportunity was the first time I'd ever moved out of the technology side into the business world. And in that space, really what I was doing was talking with everybody across the enterprise, understanding what their use cases were, their business needs were for the next 3 to 5 years, basically looking at their long range plans.
Yeah.
extrapolating from them what capabilities are they going to need and when, so that we can deliver, time to market, value add solutions, services, capabilities for them when they need it.
Yeah.
And what we first had to do was baseline what we had today, and then figure out how we're going to get to that target state via a roadmap, again, based off that the value add that it would deliver. Fantastic opportunity. I felt like it added immense value and clarity with respect to the enterprise. One of the things I was trying to do, having experience working in banks for many years, was pivot into slowly moving into the cloud. You probably all know this, and if you don't, I'll just share it. Whenever the banks took one step forward into the cloud, anytime there was a data breach in the news,
you've seen all of that. Yeah. It's been an interesting last 10 years of journey to the cloud, which has been like all sort of roadblocks to that for organizations, right?
Exactly. So I was trying to dip my toes in to push them a little bit. And then what happened was some senior leadership above me made the decision. I think it was exactly the right decision. That going all in 2 years. We want to be off of our on-prem data centers lake and into the cloud. So what that meant for me was I pivoted with respect to the platform we were using. All the services and capabilities still remain the same, but now I had to figure out how we're going to do that within the cloud. And then the additional challenge was, how do we migrate what we currently have on-prem into the cloud and continue to deliver value, unlock new capabilities for the business, continue driving the use cases that they had.
Yeah.
So that was the added complexity.
And I think the one of the challenges we see often, Rudy, is as much of a technological challenge it is to move data and the application to the cloud, equally challenging is getting people's buy-in and having them agree that, okay, this is modern system that we have on the cloud. Is like, it's almost like one best example I can think of is like you work on a spreadsheet all the time, right? Like now you think of working in a spreadsheet which is on a browser. Right. Sometimes people like just don't find the easiness in doing that. But then there's this bigger thing about enterprise data strategy, which you talked about, which is an interesting thing for me because I just literally came out of a conversation with my CIO here, our information officer, who works very closely with the line of business owners, right? In our case, the sales operations, for example, in finding out what are the outcomes that they are trying to drive and how do you align as an IT organization, which I would think you are an IT organization, right? So how do you align yourself as an IT person, not just focus on setting up systems and giving data access to people, but also go beyond that and say, okay, what are the outcomes that you are trying to drive in the business? How can I make that as a goal for me as well and my team as well, and go together achieve that business outcome that we are trying to achieve. So in other words, moving away from sort of that technique, the old vision of the IT focusing on systems and cloud and all that to be more of a business strategy partner, right? I think is an interesting conversation. I see more and more. I mean, you have been in this space for a long time. You probably see that a lot too.
No, 100%. Like, just to distill it down to even something more basic, the business, especially if you're not within a tech-run organization, the business will tend to look at us like we are order takers, right? Rather than strategic partners that work together. And that breaking that mold is extremely important. And it's a challenge too, because there's a lot of legacy mindsets about how things operate. And to touch on it as well, it's change management related, right? Like, how do we start educating and building that trust? How do we start to show the value that we can offer if you don't make us just order takers and have us seated at the table with you as equal partners?
Along those lines, let's expand a little bit on it, because I saw your experience in sort of, the whole data platform evolution you have seen. Like you talked about Hadoop, you're talking about cloud now. Like going from that on-prem warehouse sort of old style to the modern cloud lakes, and yours personally seems like you've seen the shift over the years as a consultant, as a person working on these projects, and even delivering data products and things like that, which is the common thing we see nowadays. What's sort of the single most, if you will, like most significant mindset change that data leaders had to do to go from, sort of working in the old style on-prem blah 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 world to this modern world of cloud and speed and fast and agility? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
So it's interesting. I would break it down into certain paradigms, if you will, or categories. Right? because there's the technology mindset, like the technologist mindset. There's sometimes the business mindset, and then there's like control partners. Those I would put in like infosec, privacy, legal, right?
Yeah.
And each one of them comes to the table with different concerns and challenges. From the technology standpoint, I feel like most folks in technology get and grasp the value of moving into the cloud space, right? Like the big business case that we had with at TD was tied to the operational, the infrastructure, and the licensing cost reduction that we would see as a result of moving into the cloud. Now, that being said, during my time there talking with many consultants, I would often ask them, can you show me a real world use case of the actual cost reduction rather than your theoretical? And more often than not, consultants will say, well, we moved on before the execution, right?
That's the standard, by the way.
Standard.
Steve Jobs or somebody has a great, video on this saying, if you're a consultant, you suck. You're not good at. I mean, nothing against consultants, right? But they don't see the execution of the strategy, and that's a big problem, right? Like you and I, the folks who are in the weeds of doing things, not just like working on the strategy, but also executing on the strategy and seeing where it fails, where the hard spot are. I think that's the real experience in my view.
Yes, I agree 100%. Now, the reality was my opinion shifted from, okay, if they don't know, we're taking a risk and we're going to have to manage this very closely. We're going to have to come up with the appropriate cost model, chargeback model for the business. But not only that, we're going to have to figure out how are we going to make a move from our on-prem to the cloud, realizing that the way that we are operating on-prem could be very different from how we work in the cloud. One core differential being there is no upper threshold to what you can consume in the cloud versus on-prem. You've got only a limited amount of hardware available to you. Now, arguably, you can introduce better controls in the cloud, blah, blah, blah. But that was a thing that we had to consider. When and where do we start to optimize, and what kind of...
It's also a fundamental shift in the way you use the technology, right? So oftentimes I've seen people who use on-prem for a long time, invested in a separate certain tool, expect that same experience to be in the cloud. That's a long way to look at things, right? Because now you have a complete paradigm shift in the cloud, because there's a better way to use the same solution in the cloud in a much more productive way and efficient way. And that's why it's a sort of paradigm shift. And that's where I think the cultural challenges come in, because you're using it in a certain way and you're trying to use or implement the solution of what you used on-prem in the cloud in the same way. That's not a good strategy, right? So you're a lot more benefit if you do it in the way the cloud is designed to do, which is to bring more efficiency.
And I feel like right now, what you're now leading to is the second category, which is what I call the business side of things, where they want to continue to operate seamlessly the way they used to in the new world. And fortunately, change requires evolution with how you operate. And so that entails learning something new that you might not be familiar with, but to your benefit. And so you've got to do a lot of literacy education in order to get them ready and prepared to make that move. Now, in some cases, it might be that the tool that they're using is available in the cloud. But like, as you said, working with EUCs, Excels as an example, and having them all local on your machine, and you're able to just pass data around more freely, admittedly unrestrictedly, and probably talk about that in a governance conversation coming up in a bit. But having that kind of freedom, which is very high risk, starts to get constrained when you are moving into the cloud space, where you want stronger and tighter controls, and arguably for the right reasons as well. So teaching, education is paramount here, but showing them the value add of what they get and the power and the speed at which they can now operate rather than working locally off their machines, or even within an on-prem data lake. It opens up windows they hadn't explored yet, right? It gives them opportunity to now extend beyond descriptive analytics into the realm of data science, prescriptive and predictive, and start to unlock things that they didn't have before. So that again, using TD as an example, we had a whole organization established to educate our business leaders on establishing data-driven use cases. And that spoke to why it was so successful in TD with our business stakeholders. Right. And that's absolutely paramount, is the education component. And then the last bit is the hardest nut to crack, which is those control partners, infosec, privacy, legal, because they're going into uncharted territory here, and they've got all the experience of we're dealing day to day with the challenges of having everything on-prem within our own data center. And now we're talking about doing something outside of our control.
Of course.
How do we use stronger, better controls? And the way I always liken it to banks is this, right? Banks are used to having all their money in a vault on-prem and their control. And now data being the new gold, the new currency, if you will, outside of their own domain and realm of control is very unnerving, right? Especially when it comes to the whole host of risks. So that's a massive mind shift for folks.
It's psychological. A lot of it is really psychological. I think one of the things you said about on-prem and cloud, I find because we're in data and we hear it all the time, build a culture, educate the business, that it almost seems like, this has been going on for the last 8 to 10 years, educate, that everybody at this point probably already knows it. But you'll be surprised, like you said, InfoSec, privacy, legal, to them, this is not core of their life or day-to-day business, right? To them, it's like they're busy with their own stuff. And many times you go in meetings and you say, okay, this is what I know, governance, and they're still like, oh, okay, so how does it work?
But the position here is, look, we're gonna introduce stronger controls than what existed before as a result. The technology has shifted away from how things are operating here, so the controls are weaker, right? It's sort of like using an older version of software. They stop supporting it. That's where the security vulnerability and exploits start to happen. You don't want to be on the old stuff. You want to be on the new stuff, the latest and greatest, because that's where the stronger controls are in place. So it's educating them about the value add and the better sort of world we can operate in for them as well.
Yeah.
And I think we'll talk a bit more about that a bit later on, about data quality and controls and how the move to the new world has created a lot more opportunities and given them more insight into kind of their data and stuff.
Yep.
I'm just curious, Rudy, over the years, especially moving from technical to leadership at RBC and then TD and then Walmart now, how has your leadership philosophy evolved? Because you have built a lot of high performance teams. Just curious about that.
So I'd like to think I've gotten more relaxed with age. I definitely ran a lot tighter in my younger years. I think it's when you're learning how to manage a team. I've gone from being an individual contributor to managing a team, and it's kind of like going from being single to being a parent with a kid. That first kid, you don't know what the hell you're doing with it, right? And you kind of helicopter parent it almost. And it's the same probably philosophy of how I operated when I first had a team. I was, what are you guys doing? What's going on? Do you need help? Blah, blah, blah. Which is okay, but at the same time, it kind of smothers them. And then you have that second kid and you're less worried. You know that like there's certain things you can do that they're going to survive. You don't need to be all over them. And then I had 3 kids. The third kid, you're just like, we know you can make it. And you just throw
him in the water directly and let him swim and learn himself, right?
Exactly. So I feel like my leadership style has evolved as similar to my parenting style, where I pull back more. My current view on thing, I would maybe liken it down to like 3 things from a leadership standpoint. Number 1 is autonomy. I believe that the team should work autonomously. I should be there to coach if they need some direction, but they should be coming to me with options and their own ideas and answers to their own questions. And then I can help guide. Like, I don't know everything. I don't ever believe that. And that's really, the team should know better, but I can give them from experience what I've done or what I think we should go. The second thing is 100% recognition. I'm not doing all this on my own. There's no way, right? I believe that whoever's working on what they've done, they deserve their chance in the spotlight. And that could be through, and again, recognition for a lot of folks differs. And you have to learn people's personalities, but some want a moment in the spotlight. Some people just want compensation. Some people just want a pat on the back and just leave them alone after that. Whatever it is, find out what it is and you do it, recognize them. Those are number 1 or 2. And then the third, my style, last thing is efficiency. I think this comes from my background working in business process management, controls, and efficiency. But I'm always looking for, how do we make the team run better? How do we optimize things? What's the best way to create more productivity in the team? So I've been running Agile for years. I always say Scrum Masters are not project managers. They're efficiency folks. They're efficiency drivers. Their primary job should be figuring out within the team, how do we get more story points squeezed out per person per sprint? right? And optimize, keep optimizing. And that's one view about efficiency. There's other ways as well on how we run teams, but those I think 3 are my just general leadership style and practice.
I really like that input. I mean, I can take that for my own leadership approach here. Wonderful. Rudy, one question I have for you, and this comes from the fact that you worked for most part of your life in a highly regulated industry in financial healthcare sort of thing. So my question to you is, especially as we walk into this world of efficiency, talking about efficiency, right? World of efficiency and doing the right thing at the right time and doing it at the speed at which the companies are demanding now. I'm curious, working in this regulated industry, how do you sort of find a balance between sort of this meeting the strict compliance needs of these organizations and at the same time needing to deliver the outcomes at an agile or a faster, nimbler fashion? So I'm just curious, like if you have found any sort of sweet formula there that works well.
So the first thing really is regulatory requirements shouldn't be seen as a drag on the business, right? It should be looked at as an opportunity to drive new and better ways of doing things as well. And I experienced this not only when I was at RBC, and I've ran a number of regulatory programs there, but also within Walmart when we ran our data privacy program for Bill 64. It was introducing stronger controls from a Quebec standpoint, allowing the customers access to their data, the ability to delete or change their data. And really, in all of those avenues, it was, okay, we know we have to hit these regulatory commitments, but we don't want this just to be we got to do it, drag our feet, and get this done just to meet with the obligation. We wanted to look at it like this is an opportunity to drive our business and make it better and to add value to the customer as well, right? So as some quick examples, IFRS 9, which I spoke about, it was the impetus for moving and establishing the data lake, needing that 50 years of data and needing a platform large enough, powerful enough to execute against that, enabled the opportunity to say, look, we should establish a centralized location for all of our data and make this not only available for one regulatory body, but for all risk-related programs and initiatives. And so that was an immediate value unlock that wasn't there. Another one, and again, I'll just touch on it because I know we're going to talk governance in a bit, this was the first time the organization had to really do governance. Like there was a chief data office within capital markets, and there was another one within the bank, but they were doing different things. Let me put it politely for the moment. And really, what we did was we created a real world use case that delivered on a standard for data lineage, data quality, and metadata capture. And that standard was so highly regarded that the regulators use this as the gold star measure for other organizations trying to meet with IFRS 9. And the organization within RBC lifted the team out and started to use them across the enterprise, no longer within risk after I had moved on. So they realized the value that we had created in doing this data governance work. And this is 2 quick examples from the banking side of things. On Walmart, the flip side was we ended up establishing a centralized repository for the customer, and as well establishing a centralized repository for the customer's privacy specifications, something that didn't exist before, something that allowed us more insights that we could draw from. So those were, it's always, you've got to look at it like, how do we continue to add incremental value or drive new use cases from the regulatory program so that we can unlock more value in dollars. So that was a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how.
No, that was a great answer. Actually, I really liked how you covered it. Rudy, let me touch on the elephant in the room in a way, because every time governance is mentioned, there's some sort of fear among people, some sort of like, oh gosh, like especially in a regulated industry, right? Like there's always that fear factor of like, oh, we don't want to talk about governance, man. That's crazy. Let's talk about something cool like Snowflake or you know what I mean? Like that happens a lot. So, but at the same time, I see your profile, and I mean, I'm pretty impressed actually. You've been so instrumental in sort of helping as a consultant, as as a leader on these data governance issues and as a business leader as well, and not take this as a roadblock, which is a very hard thing to do. So I think the question I come back to is so sort of in your experience, what's sort of the biggest misconception leaders have about governance, and perhaps what's sort of the single most effective strategy that you have used to evolve that governance culture from sort of that rigid control based, function into more collaborative or business enabling force, right? Like what has worked well?
So it's very similar to the answer I gave on like regulatory requirements. Governance, just like regulatory, people treat like I've got to take my medicine. It's not going to taste good, but I need it, right? And it's a tough sell as well, right? Because people want to skip some of the fundamentals, right? And the fundamentals being governance and data engineering, and just jump straight into like data science and do the cool things. And I'll give you like a story where I was presenting in front of executives. I was talking about data governance, and I had somebody else come up and they were presenting after me on AI. And it was very similar analogy to the, you never get on stage and talk after a baby or a dog because they stole the show already, right? And it's the same. I went up and I bored the audience with governance. And then the data science guy got up and everyone was engaged. They were all awake and it was exciting. I was shaking my head. I'm like, I clearly misfired here, right? How do I make this better? How do I get people engaged? And I came to the same conclusion that from like very similar to regulatory, you've got to find ways to show the value. And it boils down to culture and literacy. And it's not something that you do, with just any one group. It's got to start with the senior level executives, the C-suite. It's got to work down to the executives. It's got to be down to the managers and then down to the individual contributors, that they all understand what governance is and the value that it's going to unlock, that it's an investment, but it's an investment that pays off dividends, right? And the best way to show this is to do things incrementally. It can't be, we're going to boil the ocean and you wait 10 years while we get all the governance set up. And then you gotta do it in stages, in small steps, and then get a champion, right? Who's now experienced life is better as a result of the governance, because here's the benefits I've reaped. And then you go and use them as a preacher or the champion to go out to other stakeholders to get them involved and adopted. But you need that buy-in top to bottom, because you're not going to get anywhere. It's
no, absolutely. I think, Rudy, starting with governance, you touched the base upon, the governance structures and how different organizations, different sort of things work. But essentially, you start with governance. I'm just kind of paraphrasing your response. You start with governance. You essentially go about educating people on the structure which has been established and how they can plug in, and trying to drum up some sponsorship across the organization to kind of feed into your committees or stewardship committees and councils. And then essentially you start building those individual pillars, data quality, engineering, data sciences. But it's sort of reversed, like you said. The fancy things are the deliverables. So everybody wants to do the AI, data science, data quality work. But then when there were challenges, there's no clear line of sight on, okay, who's going to help us solve this? So I'm glad we started this discussion with governance first. So talking about governance, I'll stay on this topic for a second. We've brought it up a few times. And how important do you think, especially today, with the race to become an AI first company in every organization, is governance? And even after knowing sort of, because at this point, most companies have a governance program. Whether it's working or not working is a different story, but most companies have some sort of a data governance body in that organization. So from your perspective, what do you think are the biggest sort of challenges which leadership is having in not recognizing data governance as sort of the main thing, and then understanding that the lineage, the data quality, metadata, the data engineering, the pipelines, migration to cloud for that reason also should be an afterthought once you have governance established? What are the challenges, do you think, from your perspective, which you have seen in the banks, at other places you've been?
So I can go in a few directions on this. The first one is I'll go back to the story I told about presenting with the data scientist and I was doing governance. I was so tempted to be a party pooper and ask this question. And admittedly, I did it on the side afterwards, privately. Ask, what's your confidence on the output of the model that you've built? Right. And so I asked him that question offline, and his response to me was, "Well, we're 99% confident on the output." And I'm like, based off of the input. And I said, "Well, how confident are you on the quality of the input that you can make that assumption? Because really, garbage in, garbage out." And he goes, "Well, no, it's all handled upstream. I trust the data quality." And I'm like, "But were other checks in place? Have you lineage? You know where you're getting the data from and who's touched it and what's going on?" No. And it was, to me, it was like, if you dig into that model, you're likely going to find some noise, bias, Gen AI hallucinations, whatever, as a result of not having stronger governance practices. And maybe, or maybe not, it will affect the model quality results. But at the end of the day, you want to be sure about what you're consuming and what you're using. And the way I look at it, again, I mentioned this before, you got to do it in stages. You can't boil the ocean. So I'll go back to my RBC days, the IFRS 9 program. The way that we tackled governance for the very first time was we said, okay, went to the business stakeholders, and there's really two sides to this equation, right? Like there's the producers of data and the consumers of data. And so we were primarily talking to the consumers, the ones who were building the models. And we said to them, guys, what are the critical data elements that you have, that you require for these models that we need to govern? And they turned around and they gave us like a list of I think 100 or 200 data elements. I said, that's insane. We can't govern that many, right? Can you distill it down to 10 to 20? And they did I think they got it down to about 20. And I'll be really honest here. The governance for what we did was extremely costly, primarily from a lineage standpoint, because we tracked the lineage end to end from a technology standpoint, as well as from a business standpoint. And we didn't have any tools. So it was all done manually because there weren't any tools available back then. Now there are some available tools that can help, but there weren't any. And when I say end to end, I mean from the originating source all the way to the final destination, not like tracing it in the data lake. That's not lineage. So we did all of that for, again, 25 elements, and it was it was a multi-million, I think about a $2 million to a $2 million work effort to do those 25 data.
Yeah, I believe that. Wow.
Then we built a data quality framework from scratch. We were using something I won't name names. We were using a product at the time that wasn't meeting our needs. So we built something from scratch, and it was a framework that effectively helped define the business rules, execute on those business rules, capture the exceptions, and then build a report, and then create an issue tracker for those quality issues remediation.
So this is a place where you built 450 plus checks in data quality on the CDEs.
Yep, okay. All 7 of the the V's, right?
Right.
Like accuracy,
the dimensions of data quality,
whatever the catchy words are, right? So we did all that, and it was excellent, because what we did was, again, every close to month end, we would go back and review the report, and then the business would flag what are their biggest concerns, and then we'd go back, because we had lineage, we'd go back to the source and we'd seek remediation on those issues and get them resolved. It was clean, crisp, clear, and the business had extreme confidence in their model output as a result of the metadata capture, the data quality, and the lineage that we had done.
No, I love this. What you just described about, working with the business, defining the rules, having exception lists, going to business. It's very straightforward once you have the stewards design. Who in business is going to be the one looking at the issues, right? And that's where, once the governance foundation is in place, the data quality issue resolution becomes, very, very easy.
Yes, and sorry, I skipped the most critical component, which is defining roles and responsibilities and identifying stewards, which we had done up front. And you're right, 100%. That's the hardest task.
There's something to be said about Rudy.
I was actually
you work mostly in the large. Sorry. Go ahead, Ash.
I was just going to mention roles and responsibilities, but I'm glad you brought that up, Rudy. That's great. Because I find that is one of the areas where you're paying people the same amount of money, let's be honest. and you're asking them to do the regular business, and on top of that, you're tagging a data steward role on top of that, which is very difficult to push on people unless it's coming from up above, right? That this is going to be a new role and responsibility sort of going forward. And that sort of tension takes a few months, sometimes, 5-6 months before people accept the fact that, this is part of my responsibility now. And then, they're willing to sort of work with it on that new.
And it boils down to
structure.
what I said before, and I know you know this very well: culture and literacy, right? You've got to educate the entire organization top to bottom. And really, again, similar to what I was saying, where you need to do it targeted when you first start out. You got to find that champion, that one line of business, that one stakeholder that buys into it and believes in it, and work directly with them on establishing governance, and then have them go out and help you champion while you continue with the culture and literacy.
Yeah, no, this is great, Rudy. And I want to kind of use it as a segue to, just highlight that all of this work, which is done on governance and data quality and building pipelines and engineering to move all the data, is to basically feed the analytics, to give value to the business. So let's talk about the analytics portion of things, right? I mean, we talked about the foundational pieces on how we want to approach or building the foundation, governing engineering teams. In your experience, I know you worked a lot on this side as well. What are some of the best ways to approach, because most organizations first form data analytics center of excellence, right? DSCOE, I've heard that term so many times now. And then after that, they kind of work themselves backward into, okay, we might need data quality. Now we know I need governance, especially legacy banks where, regulation drove everything, like you said. Millions were spent on lineage because that's what was needed by a certain date. But then when you were doing the analytics for that, you realized, oh, wait a second, we have bigger opportunity here, sort of thing, right? So based on experience, anybody listening to this, what would you recommend to them how to approach analytics from a foundational perspective, or how to set up your analytics program?
I mean, how to set it? Okay, so the first thing is make sure you've got the fundamentals in place. One thing you don't want to do, especially if you're running like a COE that's supporting numerous lines of businesses, is to have each data analyst going off and getting their own version of data or their truth, right? So you want to make sure you are going to a single source of truth, an authoritative source, and you're consolidating that and making that available in a manner that's consumable for as many of your use cases as possible.
Right.
Because otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to start churning out reports. You can build report after report. Like, again, I'll use RBC as an example. I think we had about 10 times to 100 times the number of EUCs than we did actual applications that technology had built in production. That's an alarming number, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those are using or have overlapping metrics and data. And when you start to look at the reports and start to do comparison, which happens all the time, there's variance in those reports. And those variants happen for countless reasons, right? It could be governance related quality, right? As an example, it could be that two people are speaking, and this I see this all the time, speaking different language. Like they're using the same term, but it means something completely different across two businesses. And because they haven't captured that metadata in a central repository that helps define and explain, sometimes you're comparing apples to oranges, but you're calling it a pear, and both people are calling it a pear, right? That happens all the time. So it's any countless number of things. That's why I keep going on about the criticality of governance first and engineering. And it doesn't mean, again, you don't have to boil the ocean. Start off with some sliver use cases. Do it right the first time with your first use case. Again, I'll use TD as an example. This wasn't me. I didn't do this. I had joined and they had just done this, and I thought it was incredibly brilliant. There was a cross-domain challenge where they were very curious about the customer journey, and that happened potentially through different channels: phone, internet, in branch, and they didn't have any data to see that journey, because each one of those pieces of the journey was done or owned by a separate domain. And for whatever reason, the domain always felt that they were blocked from getting visibility into the other areas. So the enterprise data strategy, data analytics team, the analytics team at the time said, you know what, there's no barriers here. We're going to bring all the data together, and we're going to put together a view that shows that journey. And the reason they were showing this journey is where are the challenges along the journey that the customer has been hitting? And is it the phone? What's driving them going from phone to the internet? Or I'm sorry, I'm mixing it up. The internet to the phone, and then the phone into the branch. Where are the blockers, so that we can reduce that resistance and give them the ability to address it over the internet or directly over the phone rather than having to go in branch. And when they pulled all that data together, they used Tableau. Give a little shout out to Tableau. And they created an amazing visual. Okay. That was where they spent most of the time, not getting all the data in, not in like the governance part was rather straightforward. The data engineering was straightforward. They built a fantastic view, and they immediately started gaining tremendous insights about where these pain points were on the customer journey. So much so that it got CEO recognition. Everybody and their grandmother was now asking not just for that report, but access to that data. And it came from one use case that they had done, right? And then after they realized we need to operationalize this and start applying some stricter governance and roll this out so that everybody can consume and use from it. So they did some light governance, some light data engineering, put together an amazing visual that showed immense value, and then immediately after operationalized it by going back and investing and doing the right thing. So the way I always look at it, I say this all the time. There's a spectrum here from an analytics standpoint or from a reporting standpoint, right? Time to market is something that you think about. Is it business critical? Do you need to operationalize it? Do you need production support behind it? Probably some few other factors as well.
Yeah.
If this is just a quick once and done type exercise, from an analytics standpoint, you don't need to do a lot of deep governance and engineering. You should do some, obviously, and you should ideally go to a data set that exists. But if it doesn't, great, do that. But if you need all of that, that SDLC rigor, software development lifecycle rigor, you need to operationalize it. You need production support monitoring it, right? You need time to market doesn't necessarily matter. Meaning you got a window to address the problem. Then you should go through technology, and you should go through proper governance, and all of this should be captured and documented thoroughly. And again, it's use case specific, but build it out like the technology guys. Remember, Prash, when you were talking about partnership between business and tech? Yeah. Where the technology leadership has to sit down and say, how do we drive creating data products while delivering solutions for the business, and find those opportunities to hit our strategy on these data products. Let's use that as an example, a data set for financial transactions, build out something robust and comprehensive so that other people can use it and leverage it, rather than let them go off and build little tiny data puddles or ponds or swamps of their own stuff that doesn't tie, and there's variance and confusion, that sort of thing. Another thing
that's
you can
consistently
also do
No, go ahead. I want you to finish the thought.
I was going to say the other thing is, from an analytics standpoint, is putting one of the things, was it a TD? I was in TD, putting watermarks on your reports to officially designate these as reports that have come from the analytics COE versus some mom and pop run operation in some line of business. Also helps a lot, because now it becomes a matter of, well, I trust this. I know that there is governance applied here. I know that they're getting this from an official source of truth. I'm going to start to question what mom and pop are putting together in their little shop, right? More so than coming back and questioning the official report. So that also helped, because it started to lend some credence to what was being out there.
Yeah. Right. I think that totally makes sense, Rudy. One consistent theme I have seen over the years is the willingness and the investment organizations are doing, from going what I call as more of a, like it surfaces in different industries different way. For example, in insurance or financial services, it's sort of moving away from that insurance centric view, because multiple lines of businesses were running these companies, and they all have their own view of what that outcome they're looking for. For example, if you go into a credit card business in a banking industry, they all care about it. Did I sign up enough credit cards, right? Did I sign up enough wealth management accounts? Did I sign up whatever? Yep. That's what they care about, right? But now there is a clear shift from going from that account-centric view of a customer into a really customer-centric view, where they need to know who Prash is, right? What does his household look like? What does his family look like? Does he have a need for a credit card? Does he have more need for credit cards because he has a family now? He has a a daughter who is turning 13 this month. You know what I mean? Like looking from more of a customer centric or a patient centric, depending
Let
on
me just jump in.
industry
While
you talk to.
managing privacy expectations for the individual and their
100%.
rights, right?
100%, right? We don't want that one of those target scenarios where you know the companies know about the daughter than before his dad knows about her pregnancy or whatever. Of course, those limits exist, but my point is going away from sort of the serving self-centric purpose of running the business to serving a customer, serving a patient, serving a citizen, serving whatever that end customer that you're serving up to, and from that standpoint, trying to make the company look like as a one single unit of function rather than, oh, I just spoke to someone in support, they don't know what I'm dealing with, and now I have to speak to someone in this line of business. Like from customer standpoint, that's a pain, and I think companies are realizing that more and more. And this is where I think the huge evolution has to happen. Still, it is happening already, but it needs to continue to happen, where companies start looking at outward in, how we want to be shown up. It also shows up in some of the things that you mentioned, like talking same language, right? So if you go today and ask an expansion team how many customers we got, they say a different number because they care about how many customers renewed that quarter versus how many customers we truly have who have been with us for a long time or bought new products this year or newly acquired this year, right? So there is that language barrier that exists. I think that's where the governance and building blocks of what is our glossary of a customer definition is, right? What's our glossary of customer or our product or supplier definition is. All that matter a lot more these days than ever before.
Yeah.
Yep.
This has been a very interesting conversation. I love your response on use case-based analytics, starting with something simple, and then depending heavily on the governance structures to operationalize your reporting. Great response.
My view is always similar, no matter what the position. It's break the problem down into manageable pieces, and then using agile philosophy of MVP, deliverable at minimum viable product, to show the value and then grow that way. And it doesn't mean you don't have strategy in place. It's just it's targeted and focused so that you can see immediate results rather than having to invest and wait years to see something on return.
Last question that comes to my mind, Rudy, is how important do you think are relationships which people build while they're trying to kind of move up their career? For example, you came from a different background, and from Pega you went to bank, and the SVP poached you to come back into RBC. How important do you think those are? And do you think work alone, if people do stellar work, highlights that? Or is there any tips you would want to give the audience as well to build personal relationships with people, who pull the strings, just to kind of better position yourself for the future?
I mean, I'll say this, and anyone who's ever applied for a job knows this, right? It is far easier to get an interview and land a job with somebody that knows you and can refer you or recommend you than it is to apply cold to some database, right? So there is no value that you can put on relationship building, but it's a struggle. I mean, especially for people in technology, and I'm guilty of this. I'm an introvert to a certain extent. Managing and maintaining relationships is a challenge. It's actually, sales guys are excellent at it because that's their personality. They're extroverts. But for us, it's like I will add someone on LinkedIn and then probably never talk to them again, even though I worked with them closely. And I said this to probably Ash as well. Unfortunately, it's like out of sight, out of mind for me. But it's invaluable, right? And I will say this: I don't. People reach out to me all the time. Sometimes I haven't talked to them for years, and I get it. So don't be shy about reaching out if you haven't talked to somebody and you need something. If it's somebody that you've built a relationship with, and it's been maybe a year not talking or two, there's no harm. That person remembers you, they know you, they trust you, they get it, and they're probably in the same boat. So I would say don't ever be hesitant not to lean on and tap your own network and your relationships if you need help in some way, shape, or form, whether it's finding a job, you're curious about some mentorship, whether it's strategy with respect to bouncing ideas off about what you're doing with your current org, whatever it may be. People, and I this is true for me, I'm more than willing to help out. And I'll tell you, like, sometimes I've got a soft spot for people I don't even know. Like newcomers will reach out, and I'm more than happy to teach them, like, hey, here's some of the ropes of Canada, right?
Mhm.
It's not how you're familiar with elsewhere. Probably because my father was an immigrant and he started out with nothing and built himself up. And I feel like I owe it to others that are coming to the country that may not have that familiarity. So I will often take time to help people I don't really know in this area specifically to help guide them. So don't hesitate. Even if you don't know them, you might find somebody who's got a soft spot like me. That it says, you jive me. Like it could be cultural. It could be based off of gender, right? Like you never know. But there's always someone who wants to help somebody else out there. So don't hesitate to reach out. I would say 9 times out of 10, you might just get someone who accepts you but not answers you. And then that one time you will get a response, right? And that one response can mean anything. I'll give you a real quick example of something that I'd done. This was way back in my career journey, back when the .com bubble burst. I had lost my job. I had worked for just 1 year or 2 years. I had no job, and the market was garbage, and I couldn't find anything in Toronto. And my cousin was a sales guy in Silicon Valley, so he gave me his customer database. Privacy back then, no privacy laws. Gave me a customer database of all of his clients, and I put together, being a tech guy, put together an email that pulled the individual's name, the company they were working at, and then attached my CV. And I spam emailed probably about 10,000 people.
Wow.
and like, honestly, about more than half of them all bounced back. The companies, because there was the .com burst, they were no longer in existence. Wow. The other, I would say, remaining 40% didn't even respond to me. Then there was a subset of 5%, roughly maybe a few hundred people. Actually, that's not 5%, but whatever it might have been, 500 people that I heard responses from. The good majority said either one of two things. Actually, my company's about to go under. Do you have any suggestions to help me find a job? Number two, who the hell are you? Why are you spamming me? Right? and then I had the saints in the batch. People who said, look, we're not hiring, but here's some suggestions on improving your resume.
Nice.
Which meant the world to me. And then out of all of that, 5 companies interviewed me. Three of them wanted to bring me into Silicon Valley for a meet and greet. And then I landed one job out of that whole experience, right? So it's don't have fear. Even if you don't know them, reach out. What do you have to lose? An email bounces back, somebody just screams at you one time and forgets about you, or you land a job, right? And that's helped me with my career, right? I not showing that level of fear and realizing everyone's in the same boat. We're all trying, right? So. And you want to pay. I mean, I like to think people always are they're out to get me. I don't trust this person. But there's less than 1% of the world that lands in the antisocial, potentially psychotic category. There's no one in the organization in the world.
Nobody's time to plot against you,
right? So there's no harm in reaching out. No one's gonna come up to you, especially when you're asking for help. If anything, people are going to want to help, right? It's all intrinsic in our beliefs. So I think just use your network, build relationships. Don't be scared.
Yeah. Rudy, look, this has been an amazing conversation. I didn't even know you and how to go. I did connect with you on LinkedIn, but this has been such an amazing conversation.
Sure.
I learned a lot about your approach, especially the way you run the teams and you give them autonomy and build that culture. From that to building enterprise strategy, data strategy, governance, data quality programs. This has just been amazing talking to you. If people want to connect with you, is LinkedIn the best place to connect?
I'm not a big social media guy, but I'm on LinkedIn every once in a while, so I'll accept and then maybe chat with people if they reach out. Yeah, for sure.
I see. Wonderful. Great. Okay, great. We'll make sure people connect with you. But this has been an excellent conversation again, as I said before. Ash, anything last minute you want to say before I close?
I just want to thank Rudy for his time, and it was a fun conversation, Rudy. And thank you again for making time for it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I was a little bit nervous. My first podcast, didn't know what to expect. You guys made it very painful. Had a lot of good discussion points. It helps.
Well, look, you have an open offer, Rudy, from us. If you ever want to come back again and talk more, we are all here. So there you have it, folks. That was a wonderful conversation of another episode with Data Wars Podcast, this time with Rudy Ionides. Rudy, thank you so much. And everybody, have a great time. And if you're not subscribed to podcast yet, please do that. So we love more subscribers at this point. So please do that. And with that, a wrap.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening.